In the fog-shrouded Atlantic harbor town, a lone coastal surveyor was about to challenge decades of silence. What started as a routine property assessment took a shocking turn when they came face to face with an entire city sleeping beneath 30 feet of dark water. Rowan Pierce wasn't your typical land surveyor. For 8 years, they had spent their life mapping the places where truth meets water, known for reading coastlines the way others read faces, for what they hide, what they're about to do, what they've already done. When they discovered a perfect street grid beneath the waves after purchasing the worthless underwater parcel for $2, they had no idea they were walking into a conspiracy that reached the highest levels of local power. Pierce's determination to document what the sonar revealed would lead to the exposure of 847 murders disguised as natural disaster. What began as a clerical glitch would become a reckoning 60 years in the making. The harbor community would never be the same after learning that their prosperity was built on the deliberate drowning of an entire town, and that some secrets refused to stay buried beneath the tide. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The county said I bought a city for $2. The locals said it never existed. The ocean said they were both lying. I hold the deed in my hands as fog rolls over the breakwater like a gray blanket someone's pulling across a sickbed. The paper feels real enough. County seal. Stamp reading paid, £2. Parcel 14B submerged. GPS coordinates that put my property somewhere under 30 feet of Atlantic water. The gulls circle the rusted cannery like they're waiting for something to die. I've been a coastal surveyor for 8 years now, ever since Hurricane Callista took my mother's house and the insurance company decided acts of God weren't covered if you lived too close to his favorite toy. I learned to read water the way other people read faces, for what it's hiding, what it's about to do, what it's already done. But I've never owned any of it before. The harbour master's office sits squat and salt-stained at the end of the pier. Through the window I can see a man in a navy peacoat talking to the clerk. He's got the kind of bearing that says he's been giving orders since before I was born. The clerk points toward me. The door opens with a groan that sounds like the building itself is tired. "Miss Pierce." The man extends a hand, weathered by decades of salt spray. "Captain Elias Voss, harbour master and town councilman. I hear you've had some paperwork confusion." His grip is firm but not trying to prove anything. His eyes are the color of deep water, and they're measuring me the way I measure tide lines. "No confusion," I say. "Just an unusual purchase," Voss smiles. It's the kind of smile that probably comforts worried fishing crews and nervous tourists. Unusual is one word for it, may I? He gestures toward the deed. I hand it over because refusing would make me look guilty of something I haven't done yet. He studies it with the careful attention of someone who's read a lot of contracts. Clerical error, obviously. The county auctioneer system glitched. Happens more than you'd think with these old maritime parcels. He folds the deed and hands it back. "Lucky thing is, we can fix this easy enough. Town'll take the parcel off your hands. Donate it back to the county where it belongs. And why would I do that? Well," Voss adjusts his peacoat, "for one, you can't exactly build on underwater property. For another, those waters can be dangerous. Rip currents, shifting sandbars. We've lost more than one diver out there." His voice carries the weight of paternal concern, but there's something underneath it. A pressure like the feeling you get right before a storm breaks. "I'm not planning to build," I say. "Or dive, I'm a surveyor." Something flickers in his expression. "Mapping work, that's right. Well, I suppose that's harmless enough. Though I'd hate to see you waste your time on empty water." He reaches into his coat and pulls out a business card. "If you change your mind about that donation, you call me direct. We take care of our own here, Miss Pierce. Especially when they make sensible decisions. The card stock is thick, expensive. The kind that says you matter in this town." After he leaves, I walk down to the bait shop. The building leans against the pier like an old man catching his breath. Paint peels from the walls in long, desperate strips. A hand-painted sign reads, "Rios Bait and Tackle, live worms, cold beer." The woman behind the counter is maybe 60, with grey hair pulled back in a practical ponytail and forearms that could haul anchor chain. She's sorting hooks into small compartments with the precise movements of someone who's done this 10,000 times. "Help you?" she asks without looking up. "I need charts for the waters around parcel 14B. Her hands stop moving. She looks at me now, and I see something I recognize from my own mirror. The careful expression of someone who's survived losing everything once and doesn't plan to do it again. "You're the one bought the underwater lot. It's not a question. News travels fast. In a harbor town." She laughs, but there's no humor in it. "Honey, news travels faster than the tide. And speaking of tides," she reaches under the counter and pulls out a nautical chart, spreading it across the glass. "This what you're looking for?" The chart shows the coastline in precise detail. Depth soundings, bottom contours, hazard markers. But where parcel 14B should be, there's just blue. Clean, empty blue. This chart current? I ask. "Updated last season." She traces a finger along the coordinates I give her. "You want to know something funny? My niece works county records. Says that parcel's been on the books since the 1960s. Never sold, never developed. Just sitting there like a ghost in the system. Any idea why?" She shrugs. "Sometimes land gets forgotten. Hurricane wipes out the access road. Developers move on to easier money. Nature reclaims what belongs to her." She rolls up the chart. "Though I'll tell you something else. Had a man in here yesterday asking about cash sales. Said he might be interested in relieving someone of a burdensome property purchase." "What man?" "Didn't give a name. But he paid cash for $100 worth of tackle and left a business card with just a phone number." She reaches into the register and hands me a plain white card. Local number, no name, no company. I pocket the card and pay for the chart. As I'm leaving, she calls after me. "You be careful out there. Water keeps its secrets for good reasons. Outside, the fog is starting to lift. I can see the outline of the old seawall stretching into the distance like a concrete promise. And beneath the sound of waves and gulls and diesel engines, I hear something else. A bell. Distant, mournful tolling on the swell. I ask a passing fisherman about it. "Bell?" He squints toward the water. "Don't hear nothing, but I do. 3 slow chimes that seem to rise from the sea itself." That's when I notice the dog. It's sitting at the end of the pier, watching the water with the patient attention of something that's been waiting a long time. Old, with brindled fur that's gone grey around the muzzle. No collar, but it's well fed and clean. "That's your dog?" I ask the fisherman. "Brine?" "Nah, he belongs to the harbor. Been here longer than most of the people." He hefts his gear bag. Shows up whenever something's stirring in the deep water. I walk over to the dog. It doesn't move, just looks at me with dark eyes that seem older than its years. "What do you see out there, Brine?" As if in answer, the bell tolls again. 3 chimes, fading into the sound of water against stone. I make my way back to the harbour master's office to file my survey plan. It's a legal requirement, and more importantly, it puts everything on the record. Whatever I find out there, Captain Voss won't be able to claim ignorance. The clerk takes my paperwork with the bored efficiency of someone who processes fishing permits and dock fees all day. But when she reads the coordinates, she glances toward Voss's closed door. "Survey plan for parcel 14B. She calls out. "File it," comes his voice from behind the door. "And make sure Miss Pierce gets a copy of the safety protocols for that area." The protocols are 3 pages of warnings about currents, weather, and proper diving procedures. Standard stuff, except for one line buried in the middle. "Due to historical debris fields, recommend avoiding prolonged bottom surveys without proper archaeological permits." Historical debris fields. The chart showed clean water. I fold the protocols and head for my truck. Tomorrow at dawn, I'll launch with side-scan sonar and a camera drone. Whatever's down there, I'll map it properly. As I drive away, I see Brine in my rearview mirror, still sitting at the end of the pier, still watching the water, still waiting, at first light. The sea lies slick as oil, under a sky the color of old pewter. No wind, no waves worth mentioning. The kind of conditions that make you think the ocean is holding its breath. I launched the skiff from the public ramp while the harbor's still quiet. The side-scan sonar unit sits secured in the stern, connected to a laptop that'll paint pictures of whatever's sleeping on the bottom. The camera drone perches on its charging case like a mechanical seabird. The bell tolls as I motor out. 3 chimes, just like yesterday. I reach the coordinates for parcel 14B and drop the sonar fish over the side. The laptop screen flickers to life, showing depth readings and bottom contours in green phosphorescent lines. At first, there's nothing but the expected chaos of a sandy bottom, shells, rocks, the occasional piece of modern junk. Then the screen changes. Straight lines, right angles, the geometric certainty that only humans make. I adjust the sonar gain and make another pass. The image sharpens into something impossible, a grid. Perfect, precise, laid out like a surveyor's dream of how a town should look. Streets running north-south, cross streets at regular intervals. Foundations marking where buildings once stood, and beneath it all, running east toward the seawall. A long arched void, tunnel-shaped, big enough to drive a truck through. Well, I'll be damned. The voice comes from a skiff that's drifted up alongside mine while I was watching the screen. A woman about my age sits at the tiller, one hand holding the microphone of what looks like a professional recording setup. She's got the kind of face that's designed for radio, mobile, expressive, built for talking. Tamsin Rios, she says. WHBR, voice of the harbor. You're the woman bought the underwater city, Rowan Pierce. And it's not a city. It's... I look at the screen again. The grid stretches for 6 blocks in each direction. Maybe it is a city. Mind if I ask what you're seeing down there? I hesitate. In my experience, the first person to go public with a story usually gets to shape how it's told. But Tamsin has the look of someone who's going to find out anyway, and I'd rather control the narrative. Street grid, I say. Foundations. Looks like a planned community. Any idea when it was built? Based on the parcel records, sometime before the 1960s, but I'll need more than sonar to tell the real story. Tamsin nods toward her microphone. Mind going on record? This could be the biggest local story in years. Not yet. I need to verify what I'm seeing first. She turns off the microphone, but keeps recording. Smart. Background material for when the story breaks. Can I ask you something off the record? I say. Shoot. How long have you lived here? Born and raised. Family's been running the bait shop for 3 generations. Ever hear stories about a town being flooded? Relocated? Anything like that? Tamsin's expression shifts. You mean like when they built the interstate through Millerville? Bought out all the families, moved the whole town 5 miles inland? Something like that. She's quiet for a moment, thinking. There were always stories. Old-timers talking about the bad winter, the big storm. People who just left, but that was before my time. What kind of storm? The kind that changes everything. She looks at the water like it might have answers floating on the surface. My aunt might know more. She's the one you met at the shop yesterday. I make another pass with the sonar, this time following the tunnel. It runs straight as an arrow from the town grid to the base of the seawall. At the seawall end, the tunnel appears to widen into some kind of chamber. That's when I notice the other boat. It's maybe 200 yards away, keeping pace with my survey pattern but not coming closer. Dark hull, no markings I can see from this distance. 2 people on board, 1 watching through binoculars. Friends of yours? I ask Tamsin. She follows my gaze. Never seen them before. But in a harbor town, everybody knows everybody's boat. I wave at the mysterious skiff. No response. They just keep watching, mirroring my track, like they're conducting their own survey. I need to hire a diver, I tell Tamsin. For what? To see what the sonar's showing me. Put eyes on the bottom. I know someone. They're in kit. Does salvage work, wreck diving, hull inspections. Good with a camera, better with tight spaces. Tamsin reaches into her bag and pulls out a phone. Want me to call her? 20 minutes later, another skiff approaches from the harbor. The woman at the controls looks like she was assembled from spare parts of different athletes. Rock climber shoulders, swimmer's core, runner's legs. She's maybe 25, with short dark hair and the kind of confident smile that says she's never met a challenge she didn't want to take personally. You the one wants to go treasure hunting. She calls as she rafts up alongside. Survey diving, I correct. Scientific documentation, even better. Science pays more regularly than treasure. She secures the boats and steps across with the casual balance of someone who's spent her life on moving decks. Marin Kit, I hear you've got something interesting down there. I show her the sonar images. Her expression shifts from casual interest to focused attention. Jesus, that's not debris. That's architecture. Can you dive it? 30 feet? Easy. Water's clear, currents mild. When do you want to go? I look at the mysterious skiff, still maintaining its distance. Now, before our audience decides to get more involved, Marin follows my gaze. Yeah, I saw them on the way out. Voss's harbor patrol, maybe? Maybe. She starts pulling on her wetsuit with the efficient movements of someone who's done this hundreds of times. Whatever. Water doesn't care who's watching from the surface. As Marin gears up, I program the drone to maintain a hover pattern over the most interesting sonar target, what looks like a large rectangular structure near the center of the grid. Could be a church, could be a town hall. Either way, it's the kind of building that might hold answers. Radio check, Marin says, adjusting her dive communicator. Clear copy. She sits on the gunwale. Regulator in one hand, camera housing in the other. See you on the bottom. The splash sends concentric circles across the still water. On the laptop screen, I watch Marin's descent as a moving dot on the sonar display. Bottom in sight. Her voice crackles through the underwater comm. Holy hell, Rowan, you need to see this. What is it? Street signs. Actual street signs, still standing. This one says Millfield Avenue. My blood goes cold. Millfield. Not Millerville, the town Tamsin mentioned. Millfield. Keep looking, I tell her. Bud, be careful. There's a building here, big one. Steeple's collapsed, but I can see the foundation. Definitely a church. A pause. Rowan, there's something wedged under the debris. Looks metallic. Can you reach it? Working on it. Grunting, the sound of effort. Got it. It's a box. Lid-lined, looks like heavy. Bring it up. On my way, while I wait, I keep one eye on the mysterious skiff and another on the sonar display. The grid beneath us is huge. Whoever planned this place intended it to be permanent. The kind of community where people raised families, ran businesses, built lives. The kind of place that doesn't just disappear. Marin surfaces with a splash and a triumphant grin. One mystery box served fresh from the deep. She hands up the container, a lead-lined document case, corroded but intact. Barnacles crust the surface like ancient jewelry. Think it'll open? She asks, hauling herself back into the boat. Only one way to find out. I reach for my dive knife, but Marin stops me. Wait, if there are documents in there. Salt water and sudden pressure changes could destroy them. We should open it properly in controlled conditions. She's right. Whatever's in this box has survived underwater for decades. I'm not going to ruin it with impatience. There's more down there, Marin says, toweling off. A lot more. This was definitely a town, and from the look of the foundations, it wasn't abandoned gradually. People left in a hurry. How can you tell? Personal items. I saw dishes still stacked in what looked like a kitchen window. A bicycle chained to a post. Kids' toys scattered in what might have been a playground. She pauses. It's like everyone just walked away one day and never came back. Except they didn't walk away. They were underwater. I looked toward the seawall, trying to imagine what this place looked like before the ocean claimed it. Streets and houses, shops and schools. A church where people gathered on Sunday mornings. Children riding bicycles, families having dinner, the ordinary life of an ordinary place. All of it now sleeping under 30 feet of Atlantic water. I need to make some phone calls, I tell Marin and Tamsin. There's someone I know who specializes in underwater archaeology. Data forensics. If there's a story down there, she'll help us tell it right. The mysterious skiff has drifted closer while we worked. Close enough now to see the faces clearly. Two men, both watching us with the careful attention of people whose job it is to watch. Let's head in, I say. As we motor back toward the harbor, Brine appears at the end of the pier, tail wagging as if he's been waiting for us all morning. Behind him, I can see Captain Voss standing in front of the harbor master's office, hands clasped behind his back, watching our approach with the patient interest of someone who already knows what we found. The question is, how does he know? And more importantly, why does he care? Back at my motel room, I set the barnacle-crusted box on a towel and study it like it might explode. Lead-line document cases are built to survive disasters, floods, fires, the kind of catastrophic events that destroy everything else. What kind of disaster were they preparing for in a quiet coastal town in the 1960s? Marin sits cross-legged on the other bed, laptop open, uploading the dive footage to an encrypted server. She's got the methodical precision of someone who knows that documentation is the difference between discovery and accusation. "Your friend coming tonight?" she asks. Flying in from Woods Hole, Dr. Sahana Bose. She's done forensic analysis on underwater crime scenes, insurance fraud cases, archaeological sites where the timeline doesn't add up. Crime scenes? I pry at the box's corroded latch with the tip of my dive knife. Sometimes the sea swallows evidence. Sometimes people help it along. The latch gives with a reluctant click. Inside, wrapped in oiled canvas, a manila folder's yellow with age but miraculously dry. The lead lining did its job. The first folder contains engineering documents. Blueprints for a seawall expansion project, dated 1962. Technical specifications for tide gates, sluice controls, water flow calculations. The kind of paperwork that gets filed with the Army Corps of Engineers when you want to move large amounts of ocean. The second folder makes my hands shake. Contracts, purchase agreements, property transfers, all bearing the same signature. E. Voss, not Elias Voss. E. Voss could be his father, grandfather. But the handwriting is similar enough to make me wonder about family businesses and inherited responsibilities. "Find something interesting?" Marin asks. "Maybe." I spread the documents across the bed. These are contracts for seawall subcontracting work. Voss family company got the job for installing the tide gate mechanisms. So according to these specs, the gates were designed to be opened manually in case of emergency, to prevent flooding inland during storm surge. Marin looks over my shoulder. Seems reasonable. Except look at this. I point to a technical drawing. The emergency release isn't positioned to prevent inland flooding. It's positioned to flood the area behind the seawall. Behind the seawall would be where we dove today. She's quiet for a moment, processing. "You're saying the floodgates were designed to drown the town?" "I'm saying they were designed with that capability." The third folder contains correspondence between the seawall project manager and someone, identified only as Municipal Authority Millfield. The letters discuss relocation assistance, fair market compensation, and orderly transition of municipal services. The last letter in the stack is different. Handwritten, urgent, dated 3 days before the seawall project's completion. No voluntary relocations as of this date. Recommend proceeding with emergency measures per contingency plan. Union organizers becoming problematic. Suggest coordinating with tide schedule. It's signed with initials. RCI. Photograph every document with my phone and send the images to Dr. Bose's secure email. Then I turn to my laptop and start digging into historical tide gauge data. The National Weather Service keeps records going back to the 1930s. Tide heights, storm surge predictions, tidal coefficient readings, all available online if you know where to look. I pull up the tide data for the week the seawall was completed. Normal tidal ranges, no storm surge, no unusual weather events that might explain a sudden flood. But there's something odd about the gauge readings themselves. The data points don't follow the smooth curve you'd expect from natural tidal action. Instead, there are sudden spikes and drops as if someone was manipulating the water level manually. Marin, look at this. She peers at the screen. I'm not a scientist, but that doesn't look natural. It's not. Someone was operating those tide gates. My phone buzzes with a text from Dr. Bose. Landed early. Reviewing photos now. We need to talk. An hour later, we meet at a diner that caters to fishermen getting off the late boats. Dr. Bose is a compact woman in her 40s with silver-streaked black hair and the kind of intense focus that comes from years of extracting truth from corrupted data. She orders coffee and spreads printouts of the documents across the table like she's laying out evidence for a jury. These tide gauge readings have been tampered with, she says, without preamble. Someone went back into the historical record and smoothed out the anomalies. But they made a mistake. What kind of mistake? They didn't account for harmonic analysis. Tidal predictions are based on multiple overlapping cycles, lunar, solar, seasonal. When you fake one part of the data, it creates inconsistencies in the harmonic patterns. She pulls out her tablet and shows us a graph. This is what the tide should have looked like that week based on astronomical predictions. This is what the official records show. And this, she overlays a third line. This is what actually happened, reconstructed from the harmonic residuals. The third line shows a massive spike in water level, followed by a sustained high tide lasting several hours. Long enough to flood anything at or below mean high water. Someone opened the gates. I say, someone opened the gates and then falsified the records to make it look like a natural event. Marin leans back in the booth. Jesus, how many people lived in that town? I've been dreading this question. According to the 1960 census, Millfield had a population of 847, and they all just left. That's what the records say. Voluntary relocation due to coastal erosion concerns. Dr. Bose taps the contracts with her fingernail. These property transfers are all dated after the flood. People don't sell their houses after they've been underwater for weeks. She's right. The timeline doesn't work unless you assume the sales were coerced or forged. There's something else, Dr. Bose continues. I did some preliminary research on the Voss family company. They didn't just build the seawall. They acquired development rights to the entire waterfront area immediately after the flood. Built the current harbor, the marina, most of the commercial fishing infrastructure. Profiting from the disaster they created, Marin says. Telling and preparing this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Allegedly, Dr. Bose corrects. We need more evidence before we make accusations like that. My phone rings. Unknown local number. I answer it anyway. Miss Pierce. This is Deputy Cole Maddox, County Sheriff's Office. Captain Voss asked me to give you a call about your diving activities today. What about them? Well, there's been some concern about public safety, underwater obstacles, potential hazards to navigation. We're going to need you to suspend your survey work until we can do a proper assessment. On what authority? Maritime safety falls under county jurisdiction. I'll be serving you with a temporary restriction order tomorrow morning. Nothing personal, you understand. Just doing our job. He hangs up before I can respond. Problem? Dr. Bose asks. They're shutting me down. Temporary restriction on diving. How temporary? Long enough for them to figure out how to make this go away permanently. We sit in silence for a moment, listening to the clatter of dishes and the murmur of tired fishermen discussing the day's catch. Outside, fog is rolling in from the sea, erasing the horizon line between water and sky. There's a way around this, Dr. Bose says finally. What's that? If this is an archaeological site, and given the historical significance it could qualify, then federal law supersedes local maritime authority. I can file a preliminary site assessment request with NOAA that would give you legal protection to continue documenting. How long would that take? Normal channels, months. But I have some contacts. She checks her watch. I can make some calls tonight. Have an answer by morning. It's a plan. Not a great plan, but better than sitting still while Captain Voss and his friends decide what version of history gets to survive. As we leave the diner, I notice a familiar vehicle in the parking lot. The harbour patrol truck that was shadowing us earlier. Empty now, but warm to the touch. Someone's been watching us. Someone who knows we found something worth hiding. Back at the motel, I stand at the window and look out at the harbour. Lights bob on the water. Fishing boats preparing for the morning run. Recreational sailors getting a head start on the weekend. Normal activity for a working harbour. But I can't shake the feeling that somewhere out there, 30 feet down, 847 people are waiting for someone to tell their story. Tomorrow, Deputy Maddox will serve his papers. Captain Voss will make his reasonable arguments about public safety and proper procedures. The town will close ranks around its profitable secret, but tonight I have Dr. Bose's forensic analysis. I have engineering documents that prove the flood was deliberate. And I have Marin's footage of a town that didn't just disappear, it was disappeared. The truth is down there, sleeping under the silt. And truth, like the tide, has a way of surfacing when you least expect it. All I have to do is stay afloat long enough to bring it up. I find my equipment sabotaged at dawn. The sonar cables have been cut clean through. Not frayed from wear, not damaged by accident, sliced with something sharp and deliberate. The camera drone's battery compartment has been filled with salt water. Even my backup GPS unit has been smashed against the dock pilings. Someone spent time out here in the dark. Someone who knows exactly how to disable a survey operation. Deputy Cole Maddox arrives as I'm cataloguing the damage. He's younger than I expected, maybe early 30s, with the kind of earnest face that probably gets him invited to church suppers and PTA meetings. The kind of face that makes you want to trust him. Miss Pierce, I have some paperwork for you. The restriction order is comprehensive. No diving operations, no sonar surveys, no underwater photography. The language is broad enough to prevent me from dropping so much as a fishing line in the waters around Parcel 14B. This is based on what authority? I ask. Maritime Safety Assessment. Captain Voss filed a hazard report citing dangerous debris and unstable structures. Maddox looks genuinely apologetic. I'm sure it's temporary, just until the county can do a proper evaluation. When's that scheduled? Well, that's not really my department. You'd have to check with the Harbour Master's office. Of course I would. After Maddox leaves, I walk to the bait shop where Tamsin is stocking the minnow tanks. She takes one look at my face and locks the front door. What happened? I tell her about the sabotage, the restriction order, the neat way my investigation is being wrapped in bureaucratic tape. She listens without interrupting, her expression growing darker with each detail. They're scared, she says finally. Who's they? The people who matter in this town. The ones who own the boats, control the dock space, decide which businesses get permits. She leans against the counter. My family's been here for 60 years. We've seen how things work when someone threatens the arrangement. What arrangement? The one where nobody asks too many questions about how Captain Voss went from running a single fishing boat to owning half the waterfront. Before I can respond, the bell outside the shop starts ringing. Not the distant toll from the sea. This is the brass bell that hangs above the bait shop door, ringing in a pattern I haven't heard before. 3 quick chimes, pause, 3 more. Tamsin freezes. That's not the wind. We look outside. No wind, no one near the bell. But it keeps ringing. 3 and 3, over and over, like it's trying to tell us something. Has it done that before? Never. She's staring at the bell like it's grown teeth. But my grandmother used to tell stories about bells that rang warnings. Old maritime superstitions. The ringing stops as suddenly as it started. That's when Captain Voss walks through the door. He's traded his peacoat for a business suit. But he still moves with the rolling gait of someone who's spent his life on moving decks. Behind him is a man I don't recognize. Expensive shoes, briefcase, the kind of lawyer smile that costs $600 an hour. Miss Pierce. I was hoping to find you here. Voss nods politely to Tamsin. Morning, Tam. Mind if we use the back office for a few minutes? Private business discussion. It's not really a request. The back office smells like fish oil and old coffee. Charts cover the walls, marked with penciled X's that probably represent good fishing spots accumulated over decades. The lawyer sits across from me with his briefcase open. Documents arranged like playing cards. I understand you've run into some regulatory complications, Voss says, settling into a chair that creaks under his weight. Permits, safety assessments, that sort of thing. Red tape can be frustrating for someone trying to run a legitimate business. I'm not running a business. I'm conducting a survey, of course. My mistake. His smile never changes. The thing is, Miss Pierce, sometimes the simplest solution is the best solution. Take that underwater parcel, for instance. Beautiful piece of property, but not practical for development. Expensive to maintain, dangerous to access. The kind of asset that costs more than it's worth. The lawyer slides a document across the table. Purchase agreement. Fair market value plus a consideration bonus for your trouble. The number at the bottom makes me blink. It's more money than I make in 2 years of survey work. What's fair market value for underwater property? I ask. Whatever someone's willing to pay, Voss says. And I'm willing to pay well above assessed value. Cash transaction closed within the week. You could be on your way to more profitable waters before the weekend, and if I'm not interested in selling. Voss and the lawyer exchange a look that lasts exactly 1 second too long. Well, that would be your choice, naturally. Though I'd hate to see you invest more time and money in a project that's likely to be tied up in regulatory review for months, maybe years. He stands, straightening his jacket. No pressure, Miss Pierce. Just a friendly offer from one maritime professional to another. After they leave, I sit in the fish-scented office and stare at the purchase agreement. The amount is serious money, enough to buy better equipment, fund bigger projects, maybe even put a down payment on a house that's not threatened by the next hurricane. All I have to do is walk away from 847 people who've been sleeping under 30 feet of water for 60 years. Dr. Bose calls as I'm walking back to the motel. I've got good news and bad news, she says. Good news. I've confirmed the tide gauge data was systematically altered. The original readings show a sustained artificial high tide lasting 6 hours. That's not meteorologically possible without human intervention. And the bad news. The bad news is that someone else has been looking at the same data. My contacts at NOAA say there's been unusual activity in the historical archives. Someone with high-level access has been reviewing the same records we've been studying. How high level? Congressional committee level. The kind of access that comes with serious political connections. I feel the walls closing in. Equipment sabotaged, permits revoked, buyout offers, and now federal-level interference. Whatever happened to Millfield, people with real power want it to stay buried. There's something else. Dr. Bose continues. I found a reference to Millfield in some old Labor Department files. Apparently, there was a major strike at the local fishery processing plant in early 1962. Work stoppage, union organizing, threats of a general labor action. What kind of threats? The kind that shut down entire industries. Millfield was a company town, basically. Most of the residents worked for the cannery or related businesses. If the union had won, it would have cost the owners millions, or they could flood the town and claim it was a natural disaster. Allegedly, she says. But yes, that would solve both the labor problem and create opportunities for profitable redevelopment. After the call, I walk down to the harbor and find Brian sitting at his usual spot on the pier. The old dog looks up as I approach, tail thumping once against the weathered planks. What do you think, Brian? Take the money and run? He tilts his head, considering. Then he stands and walks to the edge of the pier, staring out at the water where my underwater city sleeps beneath the waves. The bell tolls again. 3 chimes, distant and mournful. Brian whines softly, as if he's trying to tell me something I'm not smart enough to understand. That's when I make my decision. Not because I'm brave, or because I have some noble commitment to justice. I make it because I've spent 8 years since Hurricane Callista mapping the places where truth meets water, and I've learned something important. The sea keeps everything. Every secret, every lie, every life that gets swept away. It holds them all in its dark memory, waiting for the right tide to bring them back to the surface. I'm not walking away from 847 people who deserve. To have their story told, even if it kills me. I find Evo, Calder in the salt-stained rectory of St. Andrew's by the sea, polishing brass candlesticks with the methodical precision of someone who's been performing the same ritual for decades. He's maybe 75, with hands gnarled by arthritis, and eyes the color of winter. Ocean, you're the one asking questions. About the old days, he says without looking up from his work. Depends what you mean by old days. 1962. The year everything changed. He sets down a candlestick and finally meets my gaze. I was the switchman for the transit spur, ran the rail line that fed into the tunnel system. My pulse quickens. What tunnel system? Ivy glances toward the church doors, as if checking for eavesdroppers. The one that connected Millfield to the rail yards on the mainland. Freight mostly, but passenger service too. People could live in town and work the docks, or work in town and live inland. Smart design until it wasn't. He leads me to a cabinet filled with old parish records and pulls out a hand-drawn map. The paper is yellow with age, but the ink lines are still clear. It shows Millfield as a thriving community connected to the mainland by a tunnel that ran beneath what's now the harbour. I was paid to monitor the sluice system long after the tunnel was supposed to be sealed, Ivy continues. Official story was flood prevention, but the controls were more sophisticated than that. Someone could open those gates from the surface, time the release to the tidal cycle. You're saying the flood was deliberate. I'm saying I was paid good money to keep my mouth shut and tend machinery that shouldn't have existed. His voice drops to a whisper. And I'm saying I've carried that weight for 60 years. Before I can ask more questions, a car pulls up outside. Through the window I see Deputy Maddox getting out of his patrol vehicle. He's been keeping an eye on you, Ivy says. Orders from above. Whose orders? But Ivy has already retreated to his candlesticks, becoming just another elderly parishioner going about his devotions. Maddox enters the church with his hat in his hands, respectful but watchful. Miss Pierce, didn't expect to find you here. Just admiring the architecture. It's a beautiful building. Been the spiritual center of this community for over a century. He glances at Ivy, who continues polishing brass without acknowledging our presence. Of course, we lost the original St. Andrews in the big flood. Had to rebuild on higher ground. What big flood? Oh, this was before my time. Early 60s, I think. Natural disaster storm surge. Took out most of the old waterfront district. His tone is casual, conversational. Terrible thing, but the community rebuilt stronger than before. I want to ask him about evacuation records, about how many people were displaced, about what happened to the families who lost everything. But his hand rests casually on his radio, and I have the distinct feeling that too many questions would result in another citation for disturbing the peace. Instead, I thank him for the history lesson and leave. That evening, I meet Anna and Felix Moreno at the community hall. They're waiting when I arrive. Anna pacing by the windows, Felix sitting quietly with a manila folder in his lap. They both have the look of people who've been carrying a burden for a long time. Anna speaks first. Tamsin said you're investigating what happened to Millfield. That's right. Our parents lived there. Carmen and Roberto Moreno. They ran a small grocery store on Millfield Avenue. Her voice is steady, but her hands shake slightly. The night the town flooded, they disappeared. Felix opens his folder and spreads photographs across the table. Black and white images of a young couple standing in front of a small storefront. Wedding pictures. Family gatherings. The ordinary documentation of ordinary lives. We were staying with our grandmother that week, Felix says quietly. On the mainland for her birthday. When we came back, he shrugs helplessly. Everyone said our parents evacuated. Got out before the worst of it, but they never contacted us. Never sent word. We were 8 and 10, Anna adds. Old enough to remember, too young to ask the right questions. She reaches into her purse and pulls out a key. Old brass, worn smooth by decades of handling. This was our mother's. She wore it on a chain around her neck. Key to the church bell tower. My heart stops. St. Andrews? The original St. Andrews, in Millfield. Anna's eyes glitter with unshed tears. We found it washed up on the beach 3 days after the flood. Still on its chain. I examine the key. Heavy brass construction, the kind they made to last centuries. Engraved on the head are the letters S.A. and the date 1894. The church bell, I say. I've been hearing it toll. Both siblings stare at me. That's impossible, Felix whispers. The church has been underwater for 60 years. Bells don't ring underwater, Anna adds, but I've heard it. 3 chimes, distant and mournful, rising from the sea itself. There's something else, Felix continues. He pulls out a faded transit map. This shows the rail connection between Millfield and the mainland. According to this, the tunnel was designed to be sealed with floodgates in case of emergency. But see this notation. Anna points to small print at the bottom of the map. Emergency protocols included a bell signal system. 3 tolls at low spring tide meant evacuate immediately. The gates were about to open. Who controlled the bell? The switchman, Felix says. Someone with access to the tunnel controls. Like Ivy Calder, I study the photographs, the key, the transit map. Evidence of lives cut short, families destroyed, an entire community erased from the map. But also evidence of planning, coordination, deliberate action disguised as natural disaster. Will you help us? Anna asks. We need to know what really happened to our parents. I look at these 2 middle-aged siblings who've spent their lives wondering if their parents abandoned them or died trying to get back to them. Who've carried their mother's key for 60 years, hoping it might unlock some truth. Yes, I say, but it's going to be dangerous. There are people in this town who've built their lives on keeping this secret. We know, Felix says quietly. We've been living with the weight of not knowing for 6 decades. Dangerous truth is better than safe lies. As we're leaving the hall, Tamsin intercepts us in the parking lot. Her face is pale, her normally steady voice shaking. They pulled my broadcast license, she says. Emergency hearing tomorrow morning. Inappropriate content standards and failure to verify sources. What inappropriate content? The interview where I mentioned your survey work. Apparently discussing unconfirmed underwater discoveries violates FCC guidelines for responsible journalism. She laughs bitterly. 60 years I've been on the air. Never had a single complaint until I started asking questions about Millfield. The vise is tightening from every direction. Equipment sabotaged, permits revoked, buyout offers ignored, and now media suppression. Classic pattern for covering up institutional corruption, but they've made one mistake. By moving so aggressively, they've confirmed that there's something worth covering up, and they've given me a deadline. Once Tamsin's license is pulled, once the last independent voice in town is silenced, my window for exposing the truth will close permanently. Time to find out what Anna's key unlocks. The fog rolls in thick as cotton batting as we prepare for the night dive. Anna, Felix, Marin and I huddle on the boat while Dr. Bowes monitors from shore, ready to document whatever we find in the bell tower. Spring tide's at its lowest in an hour, Marin says, checking her dive computer. If that bell's going to be accessible, it'll be now. Anna clutches her mother's key like a talisman. 60 years I've wondered what this opened. You sure about this? I ask. Once we go down there, we can't pretend we don't know what we find. Felix nods grimly. We stopped pretending a long time ago. The water is black glass under our dive lights. We descend along the sonar markers, following the GPS coordinates to where St. Andrew's sleeps beneath the waves. At 25 feet, the church steeple materializes out of the darkness like a ghost reaching toward the surface. The bell tower is intact, though draped with decades of marine growth. Barnacles crust the bronze bell itself, but I can still make out the foundry marks. St. Andrew's by the Sea, 1894, the same date as Anna's key. There, Marin points through the murky water. Hatch at the base of the tower. We swim down to a small access door, corroded but still solid. Anna's key slides into the lock like it was made yesterday. The mechanism turns with surprising ease inside the tower chamber, somehow still air-filled after 6 decades underwater. We find what we came for, a waterproof ledger wrapped in oiled canvas, sitting on a small shelf, as if someone placed it there yesterday. Felix opens it with trembling hands while I hold the dive light steady. The pages are filled with names, addresses, and check marks. A systematic list of every household in Millfield, with notations beside each entry. Most have a simple check mark, but dozens of names bear a different mark. A red X. Evacuation refusals, Anna whispers, reading over Felix's shoulder. Look at the header, at the top of the page. In careful script, emergency evacuation, Union households, final notice, March 15, 1962. The red X's mark the families who refused to leave. The families of strike leaders, union organizers, workers who wouldn't abandon their homes on the company's orders. Our parents, Felix says, pointing to a line near the bottom. Carmen and Roberto Moreno. Red X, they didn't evacuate because they weren't allowed to. They were marked for sacrifice, along with everyone else who threatened the company's control. Jesus Christ, Marin breathes. This isn't a disaster record. It's a kill list. I photograph every page while Anna and Felix read the names of their parents' neighbors, friends, the entire community that chose resistance over relocation. 47 households marked with red X's, 47 families who refused to abandon their homes and were abandoned by their country instead. As we prepare to surface, the bell above us begins to toll. Not the random ringing of water movement. This is deliberate, rhythmic. 3 chimes, pause, 3 more. The same pattern I heard from the surface. The same pattern Ivy Calder described as the evacuation warning. It's still connected, I realize. Someone's still operating the bell system. We surface to find Brian pacing the breakwater, whining and agitated. Dr. Bose waves us over with urgent gestures. You need to see this, she says, showing us her tablet. I've been monitoring maritime radio traffic. There's a demolition crew scheduled to start work at dawn. What kind of demolition? Controlled collapse of unstable underwater structures. Safety hazard, according to the work order. They're going to collapse the tunnel with explosives. I feel the blood drain from my face. That'll destroy all the evidence. Exactly. Dr. Bose's expression is grim. Someone's decided your investigation has gone far enough. As if summoned by our discovery, Deputy Maddox's patrol car appears at the harbor entrance. He approaches slowly, hands visible, but his face is tense with the kind of stress that comes from following orders you don't agree with. Miss Pierce, I need you to clear the area immediately. Emergency demolition work starts in 6 hours. On whose authority? Army Corps of Engineers. Structural integrity assessment determined the underwater ruins pose a navigation hazard and potential environmental threat. Since when does the Army Corps work at night? Maddox shifts uncomfortably. I'm just delivering the message, ma'am. You need to be out of these waters by 00:500 hours. After he leaves, we sit in the boat while the fog swirls around us like the ghosts of Millfield residents. 47 families marked for death, their homes deliberately flooded, their community erased from the map to break a strike and create profitable redevelopment opportunities. We have the evidence, Dr. Bose says. The ledger, the engineered flood data, the falsified tide records. Enough to expose the whole conspiracy. Not if they destroy the site, I reply. Physical evidence trumps documents in court. We need more. What kind of more? Marin asks. I look toward the seawall where the tunnel entrance should be, where the sluice controls and toxic waste storage might still be intact after 60 years. We need to get inside that tunnel. Document everything before they blow it up. That's insane, Felix says. Even if we could get inside, it's probably flooded, structurally unstable, and filled with whatever toxic waste they were trying to hide when they decided to drown the town, Anna finishes. But it's the only way to prove they didn't just flood Millfield. They poisoned it first. The bell tolls again from the deep water. 3 chimes warning us that time is running out. Brian barks once, sharp and urgent, then trots to the edge of the breakwater. He looks back at us, waiting. Even the harbor dog knows we're out of options. At 3 a.m., the harbor sleeps under a blanket of fog so thick I can barely see the bow of the boat. Perfect conditions for what might be the stupidest thing I've ever done. Marin checks her dive gear one last time while I program the sonar to map the tunnel entrance. Dr. Bose monitors marine radio from shore, ready to warn us if the demolition schedule changes. Still time to back out, I tell Marin. This isn't your fight. Like hell it isn't. She adjusts her regulator. You think I can go back to salvaging sunken yachts after seeing that ledger? 47 families, Rowan. They murdered 47 families to break a union. Brine appears on the breakwater, materializing out of the fog like a grey ghost. He barks once, sharp, urgent, and I see the rip current surging around the harbour entrance. A powerful flow that would have dragged us into the rocks if we'd launched 5 minutes earlier. Good boy, I whisper. We wait for the current to ease, then motor out to the tunnel coordinates. The sonar shows the entrance clearly, a dark void in the seawall, partially collapsed but still navigable. Remember, I tell Marin as she prepares to descend, document everything. Photos, video, water samples if you can manage it. We get one shot at this. What about you? I'm staying topside to monitor communications and run support. I hand her my underwater camera. If something goes wrong down there, surface immediately. Don't try to be a hero, says the woman who spent her own money to investigate a conspiracy that could get us both killed. Marin drops into the black water with barely a splash. I watch her light disappear into the tunnel mouth, then settle in to wait and worry. The marine radio crackles with routine traffic, fishing boats checking in, Coast Guard weather updates, the normal business of people making their living from the sea. Nothing about demolition crews or early schedule changes, but then I hear something that makes my blood freeze. Harbor patrol to base. Target vessel stationary at coordinates requested. 2 divers in water. Recommend proceeding with demo schedule as planned. They know we're here. They're going to blow the tunnel with Marin inside. I grab the underwater communicator. Marin, abort dive. Surface immediately. Can't hear you clearly. Breaking up. Her voice is distorted by interference. Inside tunnel now. Jesus, Rowan, you need to see this. Marin, listen to me. They moved up the demolition. You need to get out now, but the communicator has gone dead. Either the tunnel is blocking the signal, or someone's jamming our frequency. I fire up the engine and position the boat directly over the tunnel entrance. If they want to blow it up with Marin inside, they'll have to go through me first. That's when I see the lights approaching through the fog. 3 boats running dark, converging on our position from different directions. Professional maneuver designed to box us in. Harbor patrol. And they're not coming to help. The lead boat emerges from the fog bank like something out of a nightmare. Captain Voss stands at the bow, no longer bothering with the friendly harbor master act. Behind him, men in dark clothing check equipment that definitely isn't standard rescue gear. Miss Pierce, Voss calls across the water. You need to move your vessel immediately. Dangerous demolition work in progress. There's a diver in that tunnel. No authorized diving operations in this area. Check your permits. His tone is reasonable, bureaucratic. The voice of a man who spent decades making unreasonable things sound perfectly logical. I'm not moving. Then you're interfering with a federal safety operation. That's a serious crime, Miss Pierce. Could cost you more than your surveying license. The other boats have taken positions around us, cutting off any escape route. Professional trap, professionally executed, but they've made one crucial mistake. They assume I'm operating alone. Dr. Bose's voice crackles through the marine radio. Coast Guard Station Chatham. This is Dr. Sahana Bose, no AA research vessel Cousteau. We have a federal archaeological investigation in progress at coordinates 41.52 north, 70.03 west. Requesting immediate assistance. Civilian vessels are interfering with scientific operations. Voss's expression shifts. Federal trumps local. Le Gray trumps harbor patrol. And Dr. Bose has just made this an official incident with witnesses and paperwork trails. Stand down, he orders his men. But I can see the calculation in his eyes. How many crimes is he willing to commit to keep this secret buried? The underwater communicator sputters back to life. Rowan, are you getting this? The tunnel's full of drums, industrial waste containers. And there's something else. The signal cuts out as underwater explosions thump against the hull. Small charges, meant to collapse the tunnel mouth without triggering a full environmental disaster. They're sealing it. With Marin inside, I don't think. I grab my emergency dive gear and go over the side before Voss can stop me. The water is black and cold and full of silt stirred up by the demo charges. But I can see the tunnel entrance collapsing in slow motion, 20 feet down. I find Marin struggling against a current that's trying to suck her deeper into the tunnel. The explosions have damaged the sluice controls, and water is rushing through the system like a river. I grab her arm and kick toward the surface with everything I have. Behind us, the tunnel mouth folds in on itself with a grinding roar that I feel in my bones. We surface, gasping, choking on salt water and silt, but alive. Above us, Coast Guard lights cut through the fog as a fast response cutter approaches at full throttle. Voss's boats scatter like roaches when the lights come on. "Did you get it?" I ask Marin as we haul ourselves back into the boat. She holds up the waterproof camera housing, intact despite everything. "Got it all. The waste drums, the sluice controls, even some kind of monitoring station that's been maintained for decades." She coughs up seawater. Ivy Calder wasn't just tending machinery, he was documenting every toxic release for 60 years. The Coast Guard cutter pulls alongside as dawn breaks over the harbour. The officer in charge looks like he's had his morning coffee spiked with bureaucratic nightmare. "Dr. Bose says you're conducting federal archaeological research. Mind explaining why you're doing it at 4 in the morning with explosives going off?" I hand him the camera housing. "Because someone really didn't want us to see what's in there." As the sun rises and the fog lifts, I can see the harbour clearly for the first time since this all began. Normal fishing boats heading out for the day's work. Normal people making normal livings from the sea. But underneath it all, 30 feet down, the ruins of Millfield lie waiting. 47 families who refuse to be relocated, murdered by the simple expedient of opening the wrong valves at the wrong time. And now, finally, someone is listening to their story. Brian appears on the breakwater, tail wagging as if he's been waiting 60 years for this moment. The truth is surfacing at last. By the time the Coast Guard cutter ties up at the main pier, half the town has gathered to watch. Word travels fast in a harbour community, especially when it involves explosions, federal investigators, and secrets that have been buried for 60 years. Captain Voss stands with the Fisheries Co-op Board, a wall of men in work clothes and serious expressions. They've got the look of people who've weathered plenty of storms and aren't impressed by one more bureaucrat with questions. Climb onto the pier with Marin's camera housing tucked under my arm like evidence in a murder trial, which I suppose it is. Tamsin materializes beside me with her recording equipment, defying the broadcasting license suspension with the quiet rebellion of someone who's decided she has nothing left to lose. "Going live in 30 seconds, she tells me. "Whatever you've got, now's the time to share it." Dr. Bose sets up her laptop on a fish packing crate, connecting it to a small projector she's borrowed from somewhere. The morning sun provides enough contrast to make the screen visible to the growing crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen," she begins, her voice carrying the authority of someone who's testified before congressional committees. "What you're about to see is evidence of systematic fraud, environmental crime, and mass murder spanning 60 years. A murmur runs through the crowd. Voss steps forward, hands spread in a gesture of reasonable concern. "Dr. Bose, with respect, you're making some serious accusations based on speculation and misinterpretation of historical records. This community has dealt with tragedy before. We don't need outsiders turning our losses into conspiracy theories." "Then let's look at the evidence," I say, stepping up beside Dr. Bose. The first image fills the makeshift screen, the sonar map of Millfield's street grid, perfect and geometrical beneath 30 feet of water. Gasps ripple through the crowd. Even people who've lived here their whole lives have never seen their harbour's secret laid out so clearly. "This is Parcel 14B, I explain. "The underwater property I purchased for $2. According to official records, this area was abandoned due to coastal erosion and natural flooding. The next image shows the falsified tide gauge data, with Dr. Bose's harmonic analysis proving deliberate manipulation. But the flood wasn't natural, Dr. Bose continues. Someone opened the seawall gates manually, timing the release to maximize damage and prevent evacuation. Voss's composure cracks slightly. Even if that's true, and I'm not saying it is, you're talking about events from 60 years ago. Ancient history. Ancient history? Enna Moreno pushes through the crowd, her mother's brass key gleaming in her palm. This key belonged to my mother, Carmen Moreno. She and my father died the night Millfield flooded. Felix appears beside her, carrying the ledger we recovered from the bell tower. Died because they were marked for death. He opens the ledger to the page, listing evacuation refusals. 47 names with red X's beside them. 47 families who refused to abandon their homes and were murdered for their defiance. The crowd has gone dead silent. I can hear the slap of waves against the pier pilings, the cry of gulls overhead, the distant rumble of fishing boat engines. Normal harbor sounds for an abnormal revelation. This is a fabrication, Voss says, but his voice lacks conviction. Storm debris, grief-stricken families seeing patterns where none exist. That's when Ivy Calder steps out of the crowd. The old switchman looks frail in the morning light, but his voice carries clearly across the water. I was there, he says simply. I operated the sluice controls that night. Opened the gates on company orders. Timed to the spring tide cycle. 3 bells meant evacuate. But the evacuation was only for the families who cooperated. The silence stretches like a held breath. I've been tending that equipment for 60 years, Ivy continues. Monitoring the toxic releases, documenting the contamination levels, waiting for someone brave enough to ask the right questions. Marin steps forward with her dive camera. The tunnel is full of industrial waste containers. Decades worth of illegal dumping, all documented by monitoring equipment that someone's been maintaining since the 1960s. She connects the camera to Dr. Bose's projector. Images of corroded drums fill the screen, bearing the stamps and serial numbers of chemical companies that went out of business decades ago. Between the barrels, a small monitoring station, with gauges and recording equipment still faithfully documenting the contamination levels. Jesus Christ, someone in the crowd whispers. Voss makes one last attempt at damage control. Even if some environmental violations occurred, that's not evidence of deliberate flooding. You're conflating separate issues. Are we? I pull out the engineering documents from the lead-lined box. These are the original seawall contracts, signed by E. Voss, your father, I assume. The tide gates weren't designed for flood prevention. They were designed to flood Millfield on command. The contracts pass through the crowd hand by hand. Arbor workers who can read blueprints, fishermen who understand tidal engineering, people smart enough to see the truth when it's laid out clearly. That's when the official vehicles arrive. Judge Ruthie Callow climbs out of a county sedan, followed by 2 men in federal agent windbreakers. She's a small woman with steel-gray hair and the kind of presence that makes courtrooms fall silent. Captain Voss, she says, her voice carrying easily across the pier. I have a warrant for your arrest on charges of conspiracy, environmental terrorism, and accessory to mass murder. Voss doesn't run, doesn't resist. He just stands there as the handcuffs click into place, looking like a man who's been waiting 60 years for this moment. I was protecting this community, he says as they lead him away. Everything I did was to preserve jobs, maintain the fishing fleet, keep families fed. By murdering 47 other families, Anna Moreno calls after him. Judge Callow approaches our makeshift evidence table. Dr. Bose, I'll need certified copies of all documentation for the federal investigation. Miss Pierce, your $2 deed is hereby validated under emergency archaeological protection statutes. She hands me a legal document stamped with multiple official seals. What's this? Injunction preventing any further demolition, development, or interference with the Millfield site, pending full investigation. She looks out at the water, where my underwater city sleeps. As of this morning, those waters are under federal protection. Deputy Maddox approaches hesitantly, his loyalty clearly torn between his mortgage payments and his conscience. Judge, I need to report that I was ordered to expedite the demolition permits without proper review. There may have been procedural violations. May have been? Judge Callow's eyebrows arch. Deputy, there's a difference between following orders and participating in a cover-up. I suggest you choose your next words carefully. Maddox nods, understanding. I have documentation of irregularities in the permit process. I'd like to cooperate with the investigation. As federal agents secure the scene and begin interviewing witnesses, I find myself standing at the end of the pier with brine at my feet. The old harbor dog looks out at the water with satisfaction, as if he's finally accomplished whatever he's been waiting to do for all these years. Tamsin appears beside me, microphone in hand, but recording equipment turned off. Hell of a story, she says. Hell of a price people paid for it. We watch the sun climb higher over the harbor, burning off the last of the fog and revealing the full scope of the water that holds Millfield's secrets. Somewhere down there, 47 families are finally getting their day in court. The bell tolls again from the deep water. But this time it doesn't sound mournful. This time it sounds like justice. 3 months later, the harbor looks different. Not in any way you could point to and say, there, that's changed, but different all the same. The water seems cleaner somehow. The light falls differently on the waves. Maybe it's just my imagination. Or maybe truth has a way of changing everything it touches. The federal investigation moved faster than anyone expected. When you have documented evidence of 60 years of environmental crimes and a mass grave under federal waters, bureaucratic machinery suddenly becomes efficient. The Voss family fishing empire collapsed within weeks. Assets seized, accounts frozen, boats impounded pending contamination assessment. The fisheries co-op dissolved itself rather than face RICO charges. Suddenly, harbor slips were available for the first time in decades. Independent fishermen moved in. Young families who'd been priced out of the waterfront found affordable dock space. Tamsin got her broadcasting license back, plus a federal grant to document the stories of displaced Millfield families. Sit in the renovated bait shop, now serving as temporary headquarters for the Millfield Memorial Trust, reviewing architectural plans for the underwater preserve. Inna Moreno runs the trust with the fierce efficiency of someone who spent 60 years waiting for justice. Felix handles the historical documentation, cataloguing every recovered artifact and personal item. Visitor centers going up next spring, Anna tells me, spreading blueprints across the counter. Interactive exhibits, oral history archives, diving access for researchers. Felix wants to include a genealogy project, help families trace relatives who were lost. What about the toxic waste? EPA says cleanup will take 2 years minimum, but the contamination was mostly contained by the tunnel system. Lucky thing, considering how long it's been down there. Lucky, as if anything about Millfield was lucky. Dr. Bose appears in the doorway, tablet in hand, and the satisfied expression of someone who's just solved a particularly elegant puzzle. Final water quality assessment, she announces. The spring they diverted to flood the town? It's been running clean for decades. The waste was all industrial chemicals, not agricultural runoff. Once we remove the storage containers, the ecosystem should recover completely. How long for the site to be safe for regular diving? 6 months, maybe less. We're installing permanent monitoring stations to track progress. She sets down her tablet and looks out at the harbor. You know, there's enough clean water down there to support a thriving marine sanctuary. Fish populations that haven't been seen in these waters for decades. Through the window, I watch Marin preparing her salvage boat for another day of evidence recovery. She's found everything from children's toys to family photographs. Each item carefully documented and preserved for the families who thought they'd lost everything forever. The bell tolls from the deep water. Still 3 chimes, but the rhythm has changed. No longer urgent, no longer warning of disaster. Just marking time, counting the hours until the truth is fully surfaced. There's something else, Anna says, her voice carefully neutral. We got another buyout offer yesterday. From who? Development Consortium out of Boston. Luxury marina, high-end condominiums, resort hotel. They're offering $15 million for the site. $15 million. Enough to fund memorial projects, compensate survivor families, establish educational programs. Enough to do genuine good with the tragedy of Millfield. What did you tell them? Anna's smile is sharp as a fishhook. I told them the site isn't for sale. Some places are worth more than money. Felix looks up from his archival work. Besides, we've got diving reservations booked through next summer. Marine biology students, underwater archaeologists, historians studying planned communities of the 1940s. This place is going to be busier than it ever was when people lived here. Busier, but different. The life returning to Millfield won't be the same as what was destroyed 60 years ago. You can't resurrect the dead or undo decades of grief. But you can make sure their stories are told, their sacrifice remembered, their community honored. Judge Callow stops by as the afternoon light slants through the harbor office windows. She looks older than when I first met her, worn down by months of legal proceedings and federal coordination, but satisfied too. The look of someone who's seen justice done properly for once. Voss accepted the plea agreement, she tells us. 25 years federal prison, full cooperation with environmental remediation, forfeiture of all assets derived from the conspiracy. What about the others? 3 more co-conspirators identified, all deceased. But we've traced the money trail back to the original investors who funded the seawall project. Their estates will be paying for cleanup and victim compensation. She pauses at the door. You know, Miss Pierce, you could have taken that first buyout offer and walked away rich. Most people would have. Most people didn't grow up watching their mothers fight insurance companies after hurricanes. Fair point. She looks out at the water where Millfield sleeps. For what it's worth, I think you made the right choice. After she leaves, I walk down to the end of the pier where Brian waits in his usual spot. The old dog has become something of a local celebrity, featured in newspaper articles about the investigation and the memorial project. Tourists come to take pictures with the dog who knew, but Brian doesn't seem interested in fame. He just sits and watches the water, patient as always. What do you see out there, old boy? He looks at me with dark eyes that seem to hold decades of harbor secrets, then turns back to his vigil, waiting for something, though I'm no longer sure what. Maybe he's waiting for the memorial dedication ceremony next month, when the names of all 847 Millfield residents will be read aloud over the water where their town sleeps. Maybe he's waiting for the first marine sanctuary tour boat to take visitors down to see the preserved streets and foundations. Or maybe he's just waiting for the tide to turn, the way harbor dogs have been waiting for tides since humans first learned to fish. The sun sets behind the seawall, painting the water gold and orange and deep blue. Somewhere beneath those colors, Millfield Avenue runs straight and true, lined with houses that will never need repairs and populated by ghosts who finally have witnesses to their story. It's not the resurrection the dead deserved, but it's the justice the living can provide, and sometimes that has to be enough. The memorial dedication ceremony takes place on a clear October morning when the water lies smooth as polished glass and the harbor holds its breath. 4 months since I bought a drowned city for $2. 4 months since we started raising the dead. I stand on the breakwater with Anna and Felix Moreno, watching dive boats position themselves over the street grid of underwater Millfield. Each boat carries a wreath, flowers that will bloom for a few hours in the deep water before the current carries them to sea. 847 names, Anna says, reading from the commemorative program. It's going to take a while. Judge Callow has brought a portable sound system that carries voices clearly across the harbor. Representatives from a dozen survivor families have come to read the names of parents, grandparents, siblings who disappeared the night the town drowned. Ivy Calder rings a small brass handbell as each name is spoken. Not the deep toll of the church bell that still calls from beneath the waves, but a clear, sweet chime that floats over the water like a prayer. Carmen Moreno, Anna reads. Her voice steady as bedrock. Chime, Roberto Moreno. Chime, Felix places a wreath in the water above the grocery store where his parents lived and worked and died. The flowers drift slowly toward the bottom, carried by currents that no longer run toxic. Dr. Bose has brought representatives from 3 marine biology programs and 2 underwater archaeology departments. The Millfield site is already scheduled as a research station for the next 5 years, studying everything from ecosystem recovery to the preservation of submerged historical structures. It's remarkable, one of the marine biologists tells me. Fish populations we haven't seen in these waters since the 1950s are returning. The toxic cleanup seems to have triggered a complete environmental rebound. I watch a school of striped bass move through the water above Millfield Avenue, silver flashes against the deep blue. Life returning to places where death has ruled for 60 years. Tamsin broadcast the ceremony live, her voice carrying to fishing boats and Coast Guard cutters, pleasure craft and research vessels. Anyone within radio range can hear the names of people who were written out of history, now being written back in. The city of Millfield existed from 1892 to 1962, she says into her microphone. A planned community of working families, small business owners, and independent fishermen. They built a life here that was good and honest and sustainable. They were destroyed not by natural disaster, but by the deliberate actions of people who valued profit over human life. Brian sits at my feet, no longer restless. The old harbour dog watches the ceremony with the satisfied attention of someone whose long wait is finally ending. As the last name is read and the last wreath placed, Inna and Felix approach the bell tower access point with their mother's brass key. For the final part of the ceremony, they're going to open the tower hatch one more time and place a sealed capsule inside. Photos of the families, copies of the historical documents, testimonies from survivors. A time capsule that will tell the real story to anyone who finds it in years to come. They disappear beneath the surface with their diving equipment and waterproof containers. The rest of us wait on the boats above, listening to the gentle lap of waves against hulls. When the church bell begins to toll, I know they've succeeded. But this time the sound is different. Not the urgent 3-chime pattern that warned of disaster. Just a slow, steady rhythm marking time and remembrance. Brian lifts his head and howls once. A sound that carries across the water like the voice of everyone who's ever lost everything to the greed of others. Then he settles back on the pier. Task finally complete. Anna and Felix surface with empty hands and full hearts. It's done, Anna says simply. Judge Callow unfolds the final legal document of the day, the official designation of the Millfield Memorial Marine Reserve. Federal protection in perpetuity. No development, no commercial fishing, no activities that might disturb the preserved community beneath the waves. This site is now held in trust for the American people, she announces. A reminder that democracy requires vigilance, and justice sometimes takes decades to surface. As the ceremony concludes and boats begin returning to harbour, I find myself alone on the breakwater with the late afternoon sun painting everything gold. The memorial plaques catch the light, bronze letters spelling out names that no one in power wanted remembered. Dr. Bose joins me, carrying a folder full of preliminary research proposals. You know, this site could support marine biology programs for decades. Controlled environment, known baseline conditions, clear timeline for ecosystem recovery studies. Sounds expensive. Actually, that's what I wanted to talk to you about. She opens the folder and shows me a letter on official letterhead. National Science Foundation wants to establish a permanent research station here. Full funding for facilities, equipment, personnel. They're offering you the director position. I read the letter twice to make sure I understand it correctly. They're offering me the chance to spend my career studying the place I accidentally bought for $2. Guaranteed funding, university affiliation, the kind of scientific security most marine researchers only dream about. What would I be studying? Everything. ecosystem recovery, historical preservation techniques, community resilience, environmental justice. Millfield could become a model for how societies deal with industrial crimes and ecological restoration. It's a good offer, a career-making offer, the kind of opportunity that comes once in a lifetime, but I'm not sure I want to spend my life studying Millfield. I've already learned what I needed to learn here, that truth and water have a lot in common. Both find their way to the surface eventually, no matter how much pressure you apply to keep them down. Can I think about it? Of course. But don't think too long. There are other qualified candidates, and federal funding moves slowly when it moves at all. After Dr. Bowes leaves, I walk to the end of the pier where Brian maintains his vigil. The old dog looks peaceful now, no longer watching for something that might never come. Just enjoying the sunset and the gentle sound of waves against stone. What do you think, Brian? Ready for a career in marine biology? He looks at me with ancient eyes, then turns back to watch a fishing boat heading out for the evening tide. His message is clear. There are other waters to explore, other stories to uncover, other truths waiting beneath the waves. The bell tolls one final time as the sun touches the horizon. Not a warning now, not a call to action. Just a reminder that some places weren't lost to the sea, they were pushed. And that sometimes, if you're patient and stubborn, and willing to risk everything for the truth, they rise again. I fold the research director offer and put it in my pocket. Tomorrow I'll give Dr. Bowes my answer. Tonight I'll sit with Brian and watch the stars come out over the harbour, where 847 people finally have their names carved in bronze and their stories told in full. Some cities are built on bedrock. Others rise from the depths, and a few, if you're very lucky, get to do both. Up next, we have 2 more incredible stories that are waiting for you. Just click the image you want to watch, and it will take you there. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe. It would mean a lot.